This is KM Wyland, and you're listening to the 457th episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I have to admit, writing has been a bit of a challenge for me this month. Some unexpected life events and the need to be available for other people lately has thrown my writing routine for the biggest loop I have ever experienced. For the first time in my life, I feel like I finally understand what people are really talking about when they mention writer's block in awkward, hushed tones. So, on the one hand, these last few weeks have been a horrifying experience from a creative perspective, and on the other, they've been rather fascinating. I'm sure they'll spawn some experience-inspired posts down the line. In the meantime, I'm hoping and praying I'm able to get myself back into a suitable writing frame within the coming week or two at the most. So wish me luck with that. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, How to Use Paragraph Breaks to Guide the Reader's Experience. Paragraph breaks are something akin to a writer's turn signals. They silently, sometimes almost subliminally, tell readers what's about to happen and how they should react. As you may remember, or not, from school, a paragraph break in technical writing is meant to indicate a new thought. I have clear memories of being required to find and underline the topic sentence that was the organizing thought of each new paragraph. It was a boring exercise, but looking back, I realized how well it served me over the years. In fiction, we use the paragraph break a little differently. Not only do our paragraph breaks signal a new thought, they can also be used to orient readers within the overall action. Who is acting? Who is speaking? In the olden days, what constituted a cohesive paragraph, even in fiction, was considerably more permissive. If you read the classics, you know it's not uncommon to encounter paragraphs that last pages. These days, readers prefer to see more white space on the page. They want to read quickly, a skill which is aided by an author's skillful use of turn signals. So use your paragraph breaks almost like punctuation so you can guide your reader's experience of your story's action and pacing. Today's post is the second in an ongoing series in which I am analyzing the excerpts you all have so kindly sent in. My approach to these critiques is a little different from those you normally see on writing blogs. Instead of editing each piece, I'm focusing on one particular lesson that can be drawn from each excerpt, so we can deep dive into the logic and process of various useful techniques. Today, my thanks to Eric Borgeson for sharing the following excerpt from his fantasy, Rose of the Winds. And I will say that on the podcast, this is a little hard to demonstrate since we're talking about paragraph breaks, which is obviously a visual technique. So I'm just going to indicate to you verbally whenever there is a paragraph break in the excerpt and the later examples that I will be reading. It moved. Paragraph break. Hey, the squirrel leaped from the branch in a streak of red. She ran after it, weaving through a clump of sap trees, and jumped over a thorn bush. The world passed her in streaks of colors and shapes. Where she was going was of no concern. What mattered was the squirrel and little more. The squirrel's coat of brown and red blended in with the canopy of the trees as if it was wearing camouflage. She held the camera with white fingers, its leather strap chafing her neck. A drop of sweat streaked down her forehead. A low branch came up ahead. Clara lunged to her knees, sliding over the forest floor, showering brown leaves and clods of dirt in her wake, her head barely missing the branch. She stopped, panting, her heart beating in her throat. Clara looked for the squirrel, turning around in circles. She finally spotted it clinging to the gray trunk of an ash tree. Quick as lightning, Clara bent down on one knee and focused in on the squirrel. Snap. Gotcha. She smiled a wicked smile and wiped the sweat from her forehead. The squirrel retreated to the safety of the canopy, relieved that the chase was over. Clara stood up and brushed the cakes of mud off her blue jeans, though some of it still clung to them. She turned to leave, but then stopped. Where was the trail? It felt like something cold and nasty had turned her guts inside out. She looked around for something familiar. She spotted the low branch and went back under it. She soldiered on. Next was a thorn bush. Clara walked and walked, but found no bush. Was the tree with the low branch really the same one she had passed? Even in this in medias res excerpt, Eric does a great job with forward momentum, thanks mostly to the character's goal. She wants something, and that is the entire point of the scene. As the scene goes on, there's a subsequent section that I haven't shared due to length constraints. It's also clear that Eric has a great grasp on scene structure. We start out with Claire's goal to take a picture of the squirrel, encounter conflict as the squirrel runs away, and reach a yes but outcome when she succeeds in her goal, only to have to react to the realization that she has lost. So, great job on that. However, today, I would like to use this opportunity to explore the how, when, and why of paragraph breaks. For starters, the following is how I would edit the excerpt to add a significant number of paragraph breaks. You'll immediately notice how much more white space this would provide on the page, which makes the piece both less formidable, easier to read, and clearer in its presentation of action. It moved. Paragraph break. Hey. Paragraph break. The squirrel leaped from the branch in a streak of red. Break. She ran after it, weaving through a clump of sap trees, and jumped over a thorn bush. The world passed her in streaks of colors and shapes. Where she was going was of no concern. What mattered was the squirrel and little more. Break. The squirrel's coat of brown and red blended in with the canopy of the trees as if it was wearing camouflage. Break. She held the camera with white fingers, its leather strap chafing her neck. A drop of sweat streaked down her forehead. Break. A low branch came up ahead. Break. Clara lunged to her knees, sliding over the forest floor, showering browned leaves and clods of dirt in her wake, her head barely missing the branch. She stopped, panting, her heart beating in her throat. She looked for the squirrel, turning around in circles. Break. She finally spotted it, clinging to the gray trunk of an ash tree. Quick as lightning, she bent down on one knee and focused in on the squirrel. Break. Snap. Break. Gotcha. She smiled a wicked smile and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Break. The squirrel retreated to the safety of the canopy, relieved that the chase was over. Break. Clara stood up and brushed the cakes of mud off her blue jeans, though some of it still clung to them. She turned to leave, but then stopped. Break. Where was the trail? It felt like something cold and nasty had turned her guts inside out. She looked around for something familiar. She spotted the low branch and went back and under it. She soldiered on. Next was a thorn bush. Clara walked and walked, but found no bush. Was the tree with the low branch really the same one she had passed? Now, when and how you break for a new paragraph is as much a stylistic choice as anything else. Pacing will be a major consideration as well. Faster, choppier pacing does much better with shorter paragraphs, sometimes paragraphs of even just a single word. Slower, more leisurely, or more academic pacing will usually do better with longer paragraphs, although you shouldn't hesitate to break up dense sections of text when possible to make them more readable. Now, truly there are many rules of writing good paragraphs, but today I want to talk about 3 of the most important. Rule number 1, new speaker equals new paragraph. Perhaps one of fiction's most important rules for paragraphs is that of a new line for every speaker. In a dialogue exchange between 2 or more characters, the different speakers should be separated by paragraph breaks, like this. "I'm not going with you," Horace said. Break. Judith glared. "Oh, yes, you are." This instantaneously signals to readers the speaker is shifting. As a result, readers are able to keep up with the back and forth of the dialogue almost instinctively, especially if the author is also skillfully including dialogue tags, such as "he said," and action beats, such as "she glared," to clarify who is saying what. You will also want to insert a paragraph break into the midst of a single speaker's dialogue if you are interspersing the dialogue with a second character's non-verbal reactions, which brings me to an oft overlooked but equally important second rule. So, rule number 2, new actor, new paragraph. So you may have been wondering why I ended up adding so many paragraph breaks to Eric's scene when it had so little dialogue and no conversational exchanges whatsoever. The reason is that actors within narrative are treated the same as speakers. Usually, when characters exchange actions, the rules are the same as when they exchange dialogue. In Eric's example, Clara acts, then the squirrel acts. We have 2 actors in this scene, which means each should get a new paragraph. The paragraph breaks give readers an immediate signal about who is doing the acting. Now, the exceptions to this rule all hark back to those grade school adages about topic sentences. Sometimes, in some paragraphs, the emphasis will need to remain on a primary actor rather than bouncing between the actions and reactions of multiple actors. For example, you may need to briefly indicate a response from a second character, but you'll maintain a cohesive paragraph because the emphasis remains on a single character or on a cooperative action or movement. For example, here's several characters acting within a single paragraph. The servant unlocked the padlock with a great squeaking. The portcullis stuck when he tried to raise it, and the knights had to help him lift it off the ground. They ducked under, and the manservant guided them across the courtyard, through the dusty shambles of the main foyer, and up 2 flights of stairs. Rule number 3. New parts of narrative equal new paragraph. So even in a scene which features or emphasizes one primary actor, paragraph breaks are often still useful for guiding readers through the different types of action that character might be performing. These might include physical action, such as he revved the car, physical reaction, such as his heart hammered, dialogue, such as you crazy driver, she yelled, or indirect internal narrative, such as if these crazy people didn't get out of the way, he was just going to run them over. Direct internal narrative, such as if these crazy people don't get out of the way, I'm just going to run them over. And observation and or description, such as streetlights blinked past. Now, keep in mind these differentiated parts of the narrative will not always require their own paragraph break. An intimate sense of your pacing will help you decide when a break is best and when it isn't. One good rule of thumb, however, is that if you spend more than 2 sentences on any one narrative type, it's probably best to think about breaking for a new paragraph. Now, we might assemble the previous examples like this. He revved the car. Break. You crazy driver, she yelled. Break. His heart hammered. If these crazy people didn't get out of the way, he was just going to run them over. Break. Streetlights blinked past. When set up like this, the man, the woman, and the streetlights each ground themselves on new lines within their own topic sentences. The man's indirect thought about running people over is introduced and grouped with his own related physical reaction. An understanding of motivation reaction units, often called MRUs, will help you ground your instincts for ordering the various parts of narrative. A proper MRU starts with the motivation or cause, then lines up the resulting effects as another string of causes and effects. Feeling, then thought, then action, then speech. Once you can differentiate between the roles of various sentences, you will have a much better feel for when to break between them. Paragraph breaks are important both as a tool for pacing your narrative and for subtly guiding readers through the nuances of your expanding story. Used skillfully, they create an inviting presentation of text that pulls readers in, keeps them grounded, and urges their eyes and imaginations forward through the prose. So, my thanks to Eric for sharing his excerpt and my best wishes for his story's success. You can stay tuned for more analysis posts in the future. And in the meantime, please stop by and tell me your opinion. Do you prefer to err on the side of more or fewer paragraph breaks within your writing? And why do you think that is? If you'd like to be a part of the word player community over on my site and join in the conversation on this subject and many more, be sure to stop by the website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. You can always find a transcript of the most recent podcast and add your voice to the discussion by visiting the first post on the site's homepage. And don't forget that if you're looking for an older post, you can always find those by putting the podcast title in the search field at the top of the right-hand column if you're on a PC, a desktop computer, or at the very bottom if you are on a mobile device with a smaller screen. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes. And if you'd like to support helping writers become authors, I would totally appreciate it if you'd consider taking the time to leave a quick rating or review on iTunes. Thank you so much for listening to the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast, and be sure to check back again next week.